Okay, we're a minute past now. We'll get started. Recording has been hit, so that's good. Again, thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. We're going to go deep dive into worldwide Microsoft Team telephony, which is easier than you think. And we've done this quite a few times. We've got some customer case studies to talk about. We've got some examples to talk about. I'm Tom Arbuthnot. I'm a solutions director here at Pure IP, and I also run a company called Empowering Cloud, where we look after kind of community and research around teams and get really deep. And Diana, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Tom, I don't think you need any introductions, to be honest. But so I'm Diana Florea, product director at Pure IP and BCM1 Enterprise Solutions. I'm happy to be here to chat to Tom about Microsoft Teams and migrations for global companies. And as I said before, I'm excited to see what questions you'll ask. But no, joke aside, hopefully we'll be able to answer some of your questions and just clarify some of the concerns that customers might have around migrating to Microsoft Teams, especially on a global scale.
Awesome. So first off, let's have a think about some questions we hear. We spend a lot of time talking to customers, and I think like lots of people are on their Teams phone journey, or they've started their Teams phone journey, and they might have picked off an easy site, an easy office, an easy country, potentially. Maybe it's just OC at the moment. Some of the things we hear consistently from customers are addressing regulatory requirements, like telco regulation can get decently complicated and it's different country to country. So understanding that is a big one. Integrating with existing systems, because people rarely do true big bang, that they will, side by side, they will integrate potentially. They may even want to integrate on an ongoing basis. Right sizing PSTN. So not many operators want to talk about this, but we will have that conversation. Like often during migration, there's an opportunity to right size. How can you do that? In some countries, you can reduce your range and keep certain numbers. In other countries, the range goes as a whole. We'll get into that. We have the managing of porting. Again, that's different in every country. Discovery of existing telephony setups. How do I migrate my config? And supporting of other systems, I say legacy, but lift phones, analog, fax, modem, SIP phones, like the DECT, PA systems. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you might want to keep on going, or you probably do want to keep on going alongside your cloud platform, and all of these come up. Diana, out of that list of 6, what would you say is the biggest one that comes up with customers for you?
All of them do really come up. It really depends on the company size, the company profile, and what's important to them. On a global scale, right sizing is definitely one that we hear a lot. So companies, one main reason for migrating to a cloud solution, Teams especially, is to right size, to reduce costs, to make sure they verify that everything they have is accurate and is still needed. So definitely hear about that a lot. And supporting legacy and analog systems or integration with existing phone systems. Global companies, as you said, maybe sometimes they start small. They start with one size, one a small size office or site. They maybe try with calling plans at the beginning just to get a taste of how everything works while they prepare for the bigger migration. Bigger companies don't want to do this in one go. They might want to have a hybrid solution for the beginning, a transition where they keep the existing PBX on site, they keep some of the existing systems, they still integrate with analog devices or some of the old devices, even maybe if the idea is in time to move away from them. For the beginning, they do want to integrate with those. So I think those are the ones that I would hear about the most. Although everything else that is on this screen comes up in conversations.
And that you raise a good point there on the integrating with the PBX. That can often be a bit of a trap, I think, because sometimes we're like, well, we'll keep the PBX to run the lift phones and the SIP phones, and actually you've migrated 90% Teams, but you've still got 90% of the cost of the PBX because you're leaving it running for that 10% of extensions.
Yeah, it is tricky. So there's two tricky things there that we're seeing. One, there seems to be that perception still, or that You can only integrate with on-site PBX if you have direct routing or if you have on-site equipment or on-site SBCs or local direct routing. That is not the case. I guess, yes, there's scenarios and exceptions, of course, but in most cases, you can still have integration with the local PBX on site and run Operator Connect or a centralized hosted direct routing by an operator or a provider. The two can run in parallel with a trunk into Teams and a trunk into the PBX on site. We can do that at TRIP, so we have actually act as that bridge between the cloud platform and the PBX on site. So that's one problem that we're seeing with the PBXs on site, and that misconception, or people think they must have a local SBC. And the other one is what you said. And that's where the discovery comes in play. You must do a proper research, a proper discovery to see, do we actually need everything else that is on that PBX at the moment? Do we actually use it? Just because it's there, it doesn't really mean that it's needed. Teams can do most functions that legacy PBX can do. That's probably another misconception now, that Teams cannot do everything, but it can, especially with the new queue apps and everything else that they've been releasing recently. I feel like there's very little that local PBXs or all PBXs can do that Microsoft Teams cannot at the moment.
Yeah, and if there is any of those things that need local termination, we can potentially do that with an SBC locally, or even an SBC in the cloud if they can IP terminate as well.
Correct. Yeah. Great.
Awesome. So you touched on discovery there. That feels like a great place to jump into. If you're going on this Teams journey, you're probably coming from another platform, because unless you're completely greenfield, which is super rare. So I've got my Avaya, my call manager, my Mitel, whatever it may be. If a customer comes to us at that start of the journey, how can we help them with discovery, and what would you recommend on discovery?
So there's two types of issues that we're seeing. One is customers already might have a centralized phone system. They don't fully understand what is configured there. Maybe they lost some of the knowledge in-house. Maybe they want to understand, do we actually need, as I said before, do we actually need everything that is configured on that PBX? Or how do we convert what is configured on that PBX to what needs to be configured on Teams? We can help there using our tool called Reveal, which pretty much takes a backup of existing centralized PBXs, runs it through our tool. Then we have our own team that reviews that with the customer, has discovery calls with the customers, and the output of that is a file then can be used to add the configuration in Microsoft Teams for the users, the queues, auto attendance, and so on and so on. That should also tell customers how many, if they have any analog ports, what are they used for, and so on. So that's one idea about discovery. The other one is sometimes global companies have a centralized phone system, but they also have very dispersed phone systems or PBXs or devices around the globe that they don't even know what they have. They're managed by local entities or local people there. It is more difficult to get, so we could work with the local teams to understand their existing setup and how that can be combined and converted into Teams. But that means different systems, and it's very difficult for customers to understand what they have because of that.
Awesome. What about the carrier side of that? So that there's understanding the PBX config, and I think there, like that kind of tooling can help. And also, I guess, because your PBX was set up like that, do you still need it set up like that? Is a good conversation. But the other piece of the puzzle is I'm global. I've got different telcos. I've got classic physical connectivity. I've got SIP. Are there any clever ways to bring that information together, or is that a bit of a data hunt to find out who you're contracted to, what the terms are, what the trunks are?
It's unfortunately a bit of a data hunt. So part of the discovery, I think we do work with the customers, and our project management team has suggestions, they guide the customer on what they need to do, who they need to contact, what type of information they need, how to complete some of the LOAs or some of the forms that need to be completed. But at the end of the day, it is the customer that needs to figure out what they have in terms of, like, these are my providers in different countries. these are the number ranges they're providing. This is the authorized person that can sign those LOAs for number portability, for example. This is the failover that we have, or these are the options that we have for different providers.
Awesome. So the PBX config, potentially there's some wins there of pulling configs and automating them, but if you don't have a handle on your connectivity, there is going to be some work to do there to probably go find out who's billing you for service, who your provider is, what they are, and that's two important considerations, because you might have physical circuits and you need to terminate physically. You might have a term on that contract. You might not. I often have customers that don't really have a good handle on, regionally they've decided connectivity contracts. So when you come to do a global project, it might not be the person running the project knows what the circuits are in Germany or in Brazil.
Yeah, and that's where the project timelines change from the initial decision that the centralized team made, and when they actually come to look into different contracts, as you said, with different providers in different countries, they figure out that there are either huge costs of migrating, or they might need to wait a bit longer in order to migrate.
Awesome. So we've got that kind of discovery going on, and we've potentially got the option to integrate with that PBX as well. You talked about right sizing as one of the top topics. So what does that mean? I mean, from a customer perspective, right sizing, obviously they're going to the cloud, they're looking to increase productivity, but they're also looking to optimize cost. Like PSTN often is not used as aggressively as it used to be. How does that right sizing conversation happen? Is there money to be saved there in customer projects, I guess?
Definitely money to be saved. Just for the fact that you're now going to a centralized solution, or hopefully if you're choosing a global operator or a global partner, you now have a centralized place of managing your costs, more visibility to your cost, more visibility to the usage. So you can see how many calls are actually made in different countries by offices, and see, do I actually need 100 parallel channels or 3 E1s in that country? With the current system, the current vendors, local vendors, or the current PBXs, maybe you don't have visibility to that. So you have no idea how much is needed and how much not. So definitely migrating to the new technology, to the cloud solution, and to global vendors will help you have visibility into that and take decisions in terms of what I need, what I don't need. The other question is around numbers. So many customers, I'm working on an RFP at the moment, and they came back and said, well, we have 10,000 number ranges in Germany, for example. We barely use any, or we use very few of them. So just because legacy they used to have, or they used to order tens of thousands of numbers in certain countries, it doesn't necessarily mean you need them. Yes, there's certain rules and regulators on different countries. Each country is different in terms of, does it allow you to break the number ranges when you port the numbers, or can you work with the existing provider to decommission some of the existing numbers before number porting? So there's different options that we can recommend based on our experience that will help customers with right sizing and making sure they only migrate what they need, and they also have visibility to what they need. Awesome.
So you've got kind of two angles there. You've got your concurrency kind of conversation and your number of DDIs conversation as well.
Yeah. And there's certain countries where this is simple. US, for example, is one of the, for now, I'll say for now, it's one of the countries where you can pick and choose numbers from a range, and you can port only certain numbers based on what you need. There's other countries, some of them in Europe, some of them in Asia, when this is not possible. So we have a dedicated porting team that has so much experience doing this, and they can tell you, and we have documentation that tells you what is possible in each country, but also the service delivery team can tell you what is possible and allowed in each country.
Awesome. Let's level set on porting as well. Like I see we've got some familiar faces on here. Porting is where you're taking the number set from an existing operator and moving them across. So if you were coming to pure IP, we could take your telephony numbers from operator X and move them over. So people dialing into you keep the same number, you change service provider. Diana, can we do that in every country? Can we do that in most countries? How does that work?
So I'll talk about pure IP now. Each provider would probably have different rules and different procedures.
Yeah.
At Pure IP, I will not say we can provide, I will say we provide PSTN replacement services in 50 countries. Most of them, number portability is supported. There is probably 4 or 5 countries where number portability is either restricted or not supported, either because it's restricted to certain area codes or cities only, or that number portability is not a thing in that country, so it's not supported from a regulatory point of view. So yes, if a provider tells you we can give you PSTN replacement services in a certain country, unless there is a local a good reason for it, number portability should be supported with that.
Awesome. So where we can and we're the telco, we can take those numbers in. Great. And how does that work? I can imagine a customer saying, but surely XYZ carrier don't want to hand the numbers over. Like what happens there?
I don't think so. I guess that touches on what I said earlier about regulatory. So I don't think a carrier can say, I don't want to release the numbers unless the law in that country allows them to say that. And there are very few countries where the law says number portability is not allowed or not supported. In most countries, and especially most countries that we're working in, number portability is should be allowed and should be supported by all operators because it is mandated by the law. It's a regulated service. Yeah.
And there's some work to do there, talking to the actual technical terminology is losing carrier, winning carrier, and talking to the carrier, deciding when it's going to cut. Can our team manage and help with all of that stuff?
Yes. So we do provide number portability in most countries, as I said. Our team is experienced with managing that process in all the countries where we can provide PSTN replacement services and number portability is supported. They've done it day in, day out. They're doing it. Their team's dedicated and they do this only. So
that's
numbers
and number portability. If you haven't done it before, you're like, well, all my numbers are going to stop working over here and start working over here. And when's that window? And what happens if the phone stops? That like having someone who's done it literally hundreds of times feels like a nice safety blanket in that scenario.
It is. And we also can provide documentation that clearly states for each country, these are the documents that are required. So in order to port numbers, you need to fill out this document, you need to provide this legal document, or you need this. Also, the porting window is Monday to Friday between these times, or out of hours porting is supported, but only between these times. There is a risk of losing service or there is no risk of losing service. Changing of date is supported or is not supported. So because we have so much experience and we've done it so many times, we have that documented and we can let customers know in advance so they know what to expect. And they also, for some of the projects, they're working with our project managers and they help coordinate and schedule that.
Awesome. So that's a little bit into numbers, and you talked a few times about the countries we cover. So when you go to Microsoft Teams, you've got a number of options. You buy essentially the phone system from Microsoft. So you buy your phone license, or it's including E5. That's your system. Then you bring the PSTN connectivity. And Microsoft have their own. They have calling plans, which Diana mentioned. So you can buy direct from them for about 35 countries if you want to. Then we have Operator Connect, which is a Microsoft certified program where they bless certain operators to directly interop on the back end. And Pure IP were one of the first on that and one of the highest coverage on that. We'll talk about that. Then we have direct routing, where you bring what's called a session border controller, a box to connect PSTN. So that could be a box that we run in the cloud, or a carrier runs in the cloud for you, or literally a physical box on site. And there's also Teams Phone Mobile, which is a bit more of a niche use case where a cellular operator can bring phone numbers for the users, and they're both a cell mobile number and a VoIP fixed line number. And I guess something that people tend to get twisted up in is, I've got this global project, I need to pick a strategy. Am I OC? Am I DR? Am I going to run SBCs? Is that something you see, Diana?
A lot, yes. Almost every single global company is not confused, but there's so much information out there and they don't know what to choose. They don't know what's the best option. As you said, should I go full OC? Should I go DR? Is there an option to actually use both of them in the same time? Can I combine them? Those are the questions that I get a lot. And the answer to the last one is yes. Definitely can run a hybrid solution where you can combine Operator Connect and direct routing where needed. So what we actually recommend to customers, we always lead with Operator Connect for the 50 countries where we provide PSTN services. And this is because it's easier on everybody. It's easier to provision for us, to be honest, and it's easier to provision for customers and to configure and to maintain for customers in the Teams tenant. So it's a win-win situation for everybody, and it's what Microsoft wants.
Yeah, you have to be on the right Microsoft list for that. You have to be approved. You have to directly connect to their network. And what happens there is for those 50 countries, once we're contractually lined up, we can just provision numbers and they automatically appear in the Teams admin center, and you as a customer can manage them in the Teams admin center. That's all nice and slick because essentially it's pre-connectivity on Microsoft's backend.
Yes, it's a lot simpler for customers, you're right. So no PowerShell required, no creating PSTN gateways, no creating routing policies. So all that is already done in the backend, tested, everything is implemented. No worrying about voice quality because there are dedicated private connectivity links, private connections between operators and Microsoft that are dedicated for that traffic only. They're super redundant in terms of redundancy on top of redundancy. So Operator Connect is, in my opinion, and I think Pure IP's opinion, the better choice for everybody.
Awesome. So we've got the 50 countries there where we can do that, but I'm a customer and I've got some countries outside of that 50. So how do we deal with that?
That's where we can also help. So if you have countries outside of those 50 where we cannot provide PSTN services because we're not licensed in those countries, we cannot support you, we cannot give you the emergency services support and all in-country dialing and so on, our recommendation is to keep the existing providers in those countries and use either a local or a cloud SBCs or a bring your own carrier solution to connect into Teams. If it's one of the heavily regulated countries where local SBCs are required, we can provide an SBC as a service product where we actually source that SBC, we configure it, we ship it, we make sure it's installed on site, and we work with you to get it configured and connected to Teams and to the local provider. If it is one of the countries where maybe it's not that heavily regulated, where the local provider is willing to terminate the trunk over the public internet to one of our cloud SBCs, we can do that too, and that's our bring your own carrier solution, where a local SBC is not required, but you still have to contract and get your services from a local provider on site. Those solutions work with direct routing only; they're not available with Operator Connect.
That's really great to understand. So outside of those 50, I'm using a local provider, or we can point to a local provider, and I might be able to terminate it directly to Pure's cloud service, and therefore we can manage it like that. Or it might be literal physical connections, and there are many countries where physical connections are still present and actively being used, so we can drop ship the box, manage all the config, everything else, and manage that box remotely, but there is a physical box to plug in that scenario.
Yeah, and there are some providers or some countries out there where the local providers would only provide connectivity to a local address, or using a local private point-to-point connection, or maybe only E1s, T1s are still the only option. So yeah, we have to work with what is available in each country, and we have experience working with so many countries out there and shipping SBCs to so many countries out there. I don't know if you have a question about that, but shipping is a problem and something that is definitely an issue with customers.
Yeah, and we can support both models. Customers, they could source the right SBC themselves, and we can provide config, or we can take care of the shipping. And believe me, that the logistics of that I've seen on projects is not trivial. So if you want to hand off a problem, handing off getting SBCs shipped to countries is definitely a problem I would hand off as a customer.
There's two problems with SBC. So one is moving to the cloud. It means your telephony team is now maybe part of your IT team, maybe they don't have the knowledge to manage and support the SBCs. So that's where you might want to offload that to a provider like PureIP that will configure, support, right size, do all your changes on those SBCs. So that's one problem. And the second is the logistics, as Tom said, the logistics around sourcing those SBCs and shipping them to different remote locations. Sourcing SBCs is not available in all countries. There's not always presence in country for those distributors. So sometimes they need to be shipped internationally. And that's where we provide a door-to-door service, and we take care of all the import duties and taxes and paperwork. And it's never fun for countries like China or Egypt or so on. So definitely something that we can help with.
Yeah, you mentioned China there. China came up in the question Q&A. India came up in the Q&A. These are countries that are trickier to deal with. There's typically not cloud services. So are those good scenarios where realistically it's going to be a local managed SBC?
Yes.
Awesome. So we've talked about that. So that's potentially how you can do it. But you touched on 50 countries and licensing just briefly there. Like if I Google SIP trunks anywhere plus country, like there seems to be a provider that will do SIP to any country, anywhere, anytime. How with that? Yeah, you spend ages on this. So like, how do we explain the licensing requirement to be a telco and how those differ from country to country?
It's a tough question, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'll tell it from my.
Is what I just asked.
Yeah. So I think my answer to that is even if you look at the Operator Connect list at the moment, but again, as you said, if you Google providers in X plus countries, there's many operators coming up or many providers coming up. So one thing that I could say about PureIP is that it's not just that we can provide services in all those 50 countries, we provide services in all those 50 countries. So we are registered with the regulatories in all those countries. We are working with local termination providers in all those countries. So the service that we provide is true PSTN replacement service, which means we can support number portability unless, as I said earlier, there's some real local limitations why that is not possible. We guarantee CLI presentations, so calling line identity presentation in those countries. We support calls to emergency services in all the 50 countries, and we support calls to in-country local termination, local short codes or toll-free numbers, and so on. So that is what true PSTN replacement is, and being regulated as a provider, so being registered as a provider in those countries, licensed as a provider in those countries, and working with different other providers in those countries. We have uploaded numbers to Operator Connect in all 50 countries where PSTN replacements. So I've actually looked into that a few days ago, and every single country has numbers in Operator Connect and customers using it, and we've provided services in all those countries.
Awesome. So and you touched on some of the implications there. So when you're choosing a telco to work with the teams, make sure you're asking them, like, are they actually a licensed operator in that country? And it's things like that will trip you up. Is like they can provision a trunk that makes calls, but when you try to dial emergency services because it's an international trunk, it doesn't go local, or you can't dial local numbers. Like those are the kind of things that could potentially trip you up, and not to mention the legal implications. So you want to be working with carriers, and that's why we do bring your own carrier in the countries where we're not licensed, because you need that licensed carrier so we can take on the manageability, but you're all licensed because it's a local approved carrier.
Yeah. So the last thing you wanted to happen is to go with a provider maybe is not licensed or registered, and 2 years from now or a year from now, they come and say, I'm sorry, we need to disconnect your numbers or need to remove your numbers because we're not authorized to provide services or anything like that. Hopefully that will never happen, but that is a risk that could happen.
That's good to know. And Richard asked in the chat there, is there kind of a more cost-effective to go between direct routing, managed SBC, Operator Connect?
I think every provider out there would probably have their different cost model and pricing model and bundle model and so on. In terms of PureIP and how we do it, our costs are the same. So for us, if you purchase numbers that are configured on Operator Connect or that are configured in direct routing, our pricing is the same. The channels pricing are the same, the trunk pricing are the same. So from that point of view, it makes no difference to us. If you do have requirements for on-site SBCs, of course, the price of the SBC and the configuration and the maintenance of that SBC will be an additional cost. But in terms of like the 50 PSTN countries, there's no difference.
Awesome. So from a cost perspective, the same. Obviously, if you're then having a managed SBC, there's a managed SBC cost and project cost there as well.
Yeah, correct.
Great. Cool. Sorry, just skimming the chat, some more great questions there. I'd love to jump into, because I want to leave plenty of time to talk about it, a couple of case studies, because that brings it to life, and kind of we wanted to give examples. Obviously, we can't give customer names from a privacy point of view, but some of the projects where we've done, true global complicated scenarios. So I don't know, Diana, do you want to take us through some of this one?
Yes, I have to be very careful because I know the customer names. I need to be very careful I don't actually say it.
Sorry, we're all friends here. Nobody will tell anybody.
So this is a very great company, insurance company we've been working with for a very long time, actually. They came to us a while back, many years ago, when they were going through a transition on a merger. At that time, they actually had requirements for Skype. And Skype for Business and managing their local SBCs that were used for that. So we took over the management of most of their local SBCs on site and helped them with a PSTN connectivity for that. In time, they of course migrated. So we've seen this a lot from customers where they start with Skype and they migrate to direct routing, and now they're moving to Operator Connect. This is the path that this company followed too. So they've then migrated 40,000 users to direct routing in different countries globally. And now they're going through a project of migrating to Operator Connect from direct routing, or their new sites that have not been migrated to Teams before, they're going directly to Operator Connect. We're also taking over the management of their global SBCs. We're providing them with new SBCs in those hard-to-reach countries, and also take over the management of their Teams tenants. So MACDs, changes of their users, and so on. So pretty much manage the migration for them and the phone system, the Microsoft Teams phone system for them.
Yeah, so really complex, multi-phase, some tricky countries there, and again a mix of connectivity depending on the particular scenario. Is there anything in that one that was interesting in terms of PBX interop or third-party devices or anything around that?
I think the migration from Skype has actually been an interesting project. It hasn't always been straightforward. I don't know if anybody on this call went through a migration from Skype before and direct routing and then to Teams. There is some tricky parts there in the migrating process. You need to make sure that, I don't know the details myself, but I know our team handled that migration and with suggestions, recommendations, and scripts that will then migrate from different platforms, so from Skype to direct routing and then from direct routing to Operator Connect with as little interruption to service as possible.
Yeah, we should shout actually there's a cloud enablement team at Pure IP who do a lot of the projecty type stuff, and that would be the kind of people that would help you through that config and migration as well. A bit left field, but Stuart asked in the chat, it's an interesting question. Can we take USA numbers and essentially give them to UK users so they have the appearance of a US number? So I know that can be done technically, but where's the regulatory kind of stance on that?
Ooh,
I mean, the safest answer is probably not allowed. I feel like where I would go if I was put on the spot. But like it's technically feasible. It starts to get different with every country, I think, around are you allowed to present.
I think it really depends on which country. So again, this does require legal advice for most countries. Technically, anything is possible. Technically, you can do anything you want.
And
from a regulatory and legal
point
of view,
right, isn't it? Because if you're not working with an operator or a partner who says, like if you ask a techie, can I do that? The answer is yes, but it might not be compliant, or you might be allowed to do it inbound, but not present outbound or variants of this.
Exactly. You have to think about, for example, those users are now based in UK. They have US numbers. What if they need to dial emergency services? what if they need to reach a number in the UK also? Can they dial a UK toll-free number or a UK short code? Are they limited to a US dial plan only? There's so many implications you have to think about when you do that. So just on top of, am I legally allowed to do it? Is it recommended? Is it the best solution for my users? Because how am I protecting them if they need to dial emergency services, or how am I supporting them in that case?
Awesome. Yeah, really good points. Let's go on to another customer case study. So again, huge user numbers here, but also a not your typical like Teams knowledge worker scenario. So this is a global food manufacturer.
Yeah. So I think we touched briefly on analog integrations and integration with on-site, but we haven't really discussed that. It's probably a good time now with this case study. As you said, this is a huge manufacturer with global presence, global offices, tens of hundreds and hundreds of users. It is an ongoing project. We're still migrating sites for them in different regions. Similar to the previous one, it has started with direct routing. We are managing local SBCs for them, and we are now going through a process of migrating them to Operator Connect. What makes them different? But also very similar to all the other manufacturing companies we're working with, is their requirement for analog integration and on-site integrations. Customers that have factories or warehouses, they have certain requirements. They have loudspeaker, overhead paging systems, decks, door system entries, everything that is analog sometimes is a pain, or to migrate those systems or to move them from analog to IP. It is more cost effective to keep the system as they are, but integrate them to the Teams platform using on-site gateways or analog device or analog adapters.
Yeah.
In most cases, for this size factories, we are installing analog gateways. We work with either ribbon or audio codes. We do maintain and support those devices, and they would provide that bridge between the analog devices on site and our infrastructure. And then we would provide that unified dial plan, as we call it, that will allow users from Teams to dial an analog device on site, or the other way around, or will allow a mixture of Teams users and analog devices to be in the same response group, for example, or in the same queue, or in the same IVR, and so on. So yeah, definitely something we're seeing a lot with manufacturing companies.
No, that's awesome, and the SIP piece is interesting. So again, to level set for everybody, that's a standard between different pieces of telephony kit that they can talk the same language. So Teams has SIP gateway now. So in some cases, some kit could be terminated directly to the cloud gateway in Microsoft's case. So there are certain DEX devices, there are certain PA systems. For that subset, you can terminate those direct. For many others, you might need to terminate locally with SIP, or locally, you said, with analog connectivity, and that's where your local SBC or gateway comes into play. And if you're in manufacturing, if you're in anything complex, I can almost guarantee there's going to be a case, there's going to be emergency lines, lift phones, there's going to be something that needs some kind of termination. So if you know you're that type of environment, be ready for the kind of discovery, or you can sort of assume we're probably going to need some local connectivity termination here for some existing. The other thing I've seen is things like fire safe phones or chemical safe phones or hardened phones, those kind of things as well.
For sure. And you're right, there's the two options. So you have to be prepared and understand the differences between the two options. Either you go with a SIP gateway certified device that will connect directly into Teams, and then you have the cost of that plus the cost of the, Teams licenses associated with those users. Or you go with a gateway, an analog gateway, or a ribbon audio code gateway, or so on, that will then connect with using SIP trunks into the provider, like pure IP, and you have different probably costs associated from the provider with that. So overall, I think you just need to put it in balance and see what works best for your company from the technology point of view and the cost point of view.
Awesome. Up to now, we've talked about the phone system and migrating the phone system, but for many organizations, the contact center will be tied into that conversation. It might be leaning on the PBX, it might have connectivity there. What's the approach there, Diana?
So different approaches really. There is smaller companies that will not need maybe a full-blown contact center solution or a third-party contact center solution. They're happy to use existing AVRs and IVRs or queues or functionality that is in Microsoft Teams, especially with the new queues app that is coming online now and is available now. That is also an option. If the requirement is for integration with a third-party contact center solution, and I'll put there like Five Nines, Genesis, Nice, Anywhere 365, or so on. We have built what we call super trunks or multi-tenanted trunks into most of those third-party contact center providers. So we tested, we went through the interop testing in all regions for that. We tested the functionality. We have customers already using it. If you want to use it, it's just a matter of adding your trunk and your specific requirements into that multi-tenant configuration. And it is the 24 or 48 hour setup time, and off you go. So there's no need for more interop testing or more functionality testing for that. The good part is that we also can act as a bridge between the contact center and Microsoft Teams if there's no other type of integration in place already, or APIs or any other integration, which means if you pour the entire range to pure IP, you can pick and choose and say, I want this number to go to the contact center, I want this number to go to Teams. Or if somebody in the contact center dials a number in Teams, we can act as a bridge, and then the call can come to us and we will redirect it over the operator connect or direct routing trunk to Teams without that call going out to the PSTN. Certain restrictions there, of course, it has to be within the same region and so on, but in most cases that is possible.
Awesome. So lots of options there. So you can, you could keep ticking along with your own contact center, and we could reroute the numbers. You can bring a new team certified contact center. You could go to one of the big cloud providers. And the critical thing, I think you've summed up well there, is when we're in control of the numbers, we can then route them in any direction. It might be a combination. QSAT might be great for your internal use cases, and you might need something else for your larger use cases. You can have the same trunks and number range and do different clever things with them. That's awesome. We had a last question in the chat. Someone asked about billing and managing kind of billing and invoicing, and I think they were getting to different breakdowns of different bills for different countries. Any thoughts on that?
I think that is one of the benefits of moving from different providers in different countries to one centralized phone system like Microsoft Teams and one global provider. The fact that you have visibility not just to your usage and your services, but to your bill. Everything is consolidated into one platform, one portal, one invoice if needed, one currency if that is what you require. At Pure IP, we're very flexible, to be honest. So more flexible than we should be maybe sometimes, but we're flexible in terms of we allow you to have either one invoice in one currency, or you can split that in multiple invoices per office or per country in different currencies, as long as the local rules and taxes and so on are followed. Then yeah, we're pretty flexible when it comes to invoicing. As I said, one of the main benefits of moving from different providers, besides the fact that you speak to one team, you have one account manager, one billing team you work with, and you don't have to try to translate different invoices in different languages and different formats and understand what they mean. So they're all in one place.
Awesome. So we're getting close to time, but I hope we've provided value to people there. We've had some great questions in the private chat and some great questions in the chat there. I think if I try and sum it up, part of this being, easy to do global, we kind of say that a little bit tongue in cheek, we're making it as easy as possible. Some of it is technical solutions. We can do OC from the cloud, we can do clever drop shipping and managed SBC, but a big part of this is also working with a partner who's done it, hundreds of times, helping you with the discovery, helping you with the porting, helping you with some of the pitfalls and challenges. So if anybody on this call is, on a project or thinking about doing a project, like I would really encourage you to reach out. We can hook you up with the relevant people. Just have the conversation about, here's my country, here's my use cases, because the team here have done it multiple times, so they can immediately say, okay, this country is going to be easy in its OC, this country is going to be harder. If you've got that country, there's this regulation. And that's where we're really trying to make it easy. And it's always going to be a journey. Like, I think you have to work with a partner over multiple countries, multiple phases. But hopefully some of the stories there, customer stories, and Diana's great knowledge has helped you understand some of the things to be aware of. And if you want to keep that conversation going, we'd love to keep that conversation going. Diana, any last thoughts?
No, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the questions, great questions. And thanks, Tom, for not asking difficult questions.
Well, I asked everything I had. You weren't stumped, so that was good. No, thanks so much, everybody. We'll be throwing around a recording and deck, I think, for everybody who attended and for those on demand. Again, if you want to reach out, you know where we are. Details are on the screen. Really appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully see you all soon. Thanks so much.